One of the biggest mistakes that I see brands making today is that they're not empowering their employees to capture their own content using their smartphone. So that's why today we're going to film this entire video using an iPhone to show you just how easy it can be. Let's do it. Almost every company knows that they need more content, but quite often they either can't afford or can't manage the planning and scheduling to get a full-scale video production team out to every offsite, to every overseas business development trip or otherwise. But here's the thing, with a bit of investment, focus, and strategy, they could be arming their entire team to capture their own content to help share their story, build their brand, drive new sales, and attract great new talent. I began my whole career in the video production world shooting on iPhone, and now I own my own production company with hundreds of thousands of dollars in camera equipment and production equipment, but I still prefer using iPhone for behind the scenes and just capturing raw content because it's just so easy to use and to capture. Here are just a few examples. Threesixfive, we have been training organizations and their employees to capture their own authentic content. We've had a few people reach out and ask if we had a best practices playbook to share. So we decided to create this simplified, no BS how-to video for organizations that want to stop shuffling their feet and want to start creating content. There's this cliche in the filmmaking and content creation world that everyone hates to hear because it's true and because it puts the responsibility on us to actually do the work. And that cliche is, it's not about the gear. The concept of actually getting started and having to get out there and make your first few videos can feel daunting. So we trick ourselves into thinking that we need to watch 400 YouTube videos on the best smartphone for video content before starting, when in reality, we just need to get out there, start making mistakes, and figure it out. Any modern smartphone is going to have an excellent video camera on it, but if I had to make a recommendation, I would just say get the newest iPhone with a lot of storage. The quality is incredible and they're ridiculously easy to use. Stabilizers can be useful in certain situations, but I would argue that the iPhone's in-camera stabilization is so good that you don't need a stabilizer. Especially for a beginner, I would argue that that piece of equipment is more likely to be an impediment or a barrier to shooting than anything else. Just hold the camera steady with two hands and it'll look great. If you're curious about lenses and mics, hang tight, I'll get to those in a bit. All right, now let's talk about orientation. This one is pretty simple. You just need to figure out where you want your content to live before you capture. If you're capturing your content primarily for Instagram Reels or Stories or TikTok, then you're gonna wanna film in a vertical or portrait or 9:16 orientation like this one. If you're capturing content for YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, then you'll want to prioritize capturing your content in landscape, horizontal, or 16:9 orientation like this. You can technically edit landscape footage into portrait orientation or vice versa, but it can be a pain in the ass. The good news is an iPhone makes it super easy to shoot both orientations, and in fact, much easier than with a camera. Okay, so now we're going to talk about your optimal camera settings. First up, in your settings, under camera, then record settings, turn HDR video off. If you absolutely need to know why, you can message or email me. Okay, now let's talk quickly about frame rate and resolution. For any real-time footage, you're gonna wanna set your camera settings to 4K 24 FPS. That's 4K resolution and 24 frames per second. If you want to slow down any of your B-roll footage in the editing process so that it looks smooth and cinematic, you'll want to capture that in the 4K 60 FPS setting. You can't slow down 24 FPS footage in post without it looking super choppy, but 24 looks way better in regular speed than 60 FPS. The 4K setting as opposed to 1080 is just much higher resolution, which gives you a lot more flexibility in post-production to either crop or zoom in on your image without it getting blurry. This also makes it easier to edit your content in both vertical and horizontal formats. As a rule of thumb, I would just shoot everything in 4K if you can. Okay, now let's talk about audio quickly. There are tons of different microphones that you can get for your iPhone, but I personally have made hundreds of videos using an iPhone and I've never used a mic. I think that the in-camera mic is pretty stellar. Just make sure that you try to shoot in a quiet location, and the closer you can get to your subject, the better. I'll show you the difference in the audio when I stand far away. Your You're probably going to get a lot more echo from over here because it's working harder to pick my sound up. Versus when I'm closer here, it's going to feel a lot cleaner. All right, now let's talk about framing. So framing is essentially just how you compose your image to bring attention to your subject or object of interest, ideally in an aesthetically pleasing way. And perhaps the best starting place would be to begin learning about the rule of thirds and how to compose your images on these intersecting lines. Unless you're just a born natural, framing takes a lot of practice and repetition so that you can develop an eye for what makes a nice image or frame. So again, just get out there and start to make stuff and you'll begin to figure out what works and what doesn't. All right, now let's talk quickly about lenses. Depending which model of iPhone you have, it's going to come with some combination of the following lenses: a 0.5, 1x zoom, 2x zoom, and 3x zoom. This is the iPhone 13 Pro. It comes with a 0.5. Zen, are we on 0.5 right now?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see the 1x. Now let's see the 3x. Again, in my opinion, it's not about the gear. You don't need any lens attachments. They'll just become another distraction. The 1x zoom is going to work the best in low light situations. And I would say that 80% of the time that you're shooting B-roll, you're gonna wanna stay in either the 0.5x zoom or the 1x zoom. And when you're recording someone speaking, 99% of the time you're gonna wanna be in the 0.5 or the 1x zoom so that you can get close enough to your subject to get clean audio. Now, I just want to touch quickly on software and apps. There are a whole bunch of third-party apps out there that claim to be able to get the most out of your camera, but I say don't bother. They leverage a bunch of advanced settings like ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, but if you haven't mastered these skills already, and if you don't have an advanced understanding of what they mean, you're actually just gonna end up making a worse image and to complicate things unnecessarily. The iPhone's auto settings work really, really well. I would just use those. That's what I do. Okay, a quick bit now on lighting and exposure. So lighting is another rabbit hole and a great way to waste a ton of time on Google and YouTube trying to find out what are the best lights for iPhone videography. I've, again, made hundreds of videos using iPhone and I've never used a light. I would recommend spending an hour learning to use natural light, reading, watching some videos on YouTube, and you'll be in great shape. With all of this said, yes, using professional lighting will make your image look nicer if you use it right. All right, and last but certainly not least, let's talk about editing. As long as you capture decent footage, effective editing can work wonders. Great editing can turn some pretty crappy shots into a good final video, but on the other hand, bad editing can turn great shots into a poor final product. If you have someone on your team who can edit, that's awesome. If you have someone on your team who wants to learn to edit, that's also awesome. In terms of an editing software, Adobe Premiere does tend to be the industry standard, but at 365, we use Final Cut, and I highly recommend it because it's faster, easier to use, and highly, highly intuitive. For any content that does need a certain level of professional polish, I would consider outsourcing to professionals. All right, I think that's it for now for our no BS guide to in-house iPhone content. This should hopefully be a great starting point, but if you're interested in learning more, if you want to schedule a training session for your team, or create a custom tailored smartphone content plan to share your organization's story and culture, you can reach out through our website at threesixfive.ca. Do not miss out on this opportunity. Find a way to make it happen. Start getting content created and out the door. Thanks for watching. Good luck out there.